So welcome back everyone. So far we have assumed that the acquired NMR signals are simply added together in order to enhance the signal to noise ratio. Like as we have learned in signal averaging that we just simply add different signals during phase cycling to remove artifacts or during signal averaging to increase the signal to noise ratio and so on, right? So let us now see more sophisticated experiments where acquired signals are not simply added, but rather these are called as arrayed experiments. So okay, so these are also called as multi-dimensional experiments. These actually form the basis of multi-dimensional experiments. Okay, so let us see what are arrayed experiments. So let us take a look at following pulse sequence. So it's a very basic pulse sequence with a 90-degree pulse, a delay called T1, followed by another 90-degree pulse, and then acquisition, right? Okay, so let us label these. So phi 1, 90, phi 2, and phi receiver, right? So this is a standard nomenclature and this is T2 here. So now you see that we have labeled the two pulses as 90 phi 1. The 90 represents the flip angle and phi 1 represents the phase cycling, that it is not a constant phase, there is some sort of a phase cycling associated with this particular pulse. Similarly 90 phi 2 indicates that again it's a flip angle 90 degree with phi 2 phasing, and phi receiver is the receiver phase, right? Whatever phase is accumulated throughout the pulse program is then adjusted with phi receiver, so that the wanted signals are added up and unwanted signals are cancelled, rejected, right? In addition to that, you notice that there are two more labels. One is T1 and another is T2. So what is this T1 and T2? So far we have learnt the delays. For example, we have seen spin echo or inept. So delays there were labeled as tau, right? So taus are generally constant delays, whereas T1 and delay represents is a incrementable delay. What does it mean? What is incrementable delay? Or we can say that the T1 is variable. Okay, what is incrementable delay? What is variable delay? For example, during one complete phase cycle, T1 is kept constant, and when next phase cycling starts, let us say that the phase cycling is of step 4. So for first 4 scans, when the first step of phase cycling is going on, first 4 scans T1 will be constant, and during next set of 4 scans T1 will be incremented to T1 plus delta T2. So what I mean is, so scan, let's say scan 1 to 4, the delay between the two pulses is like this. Let's call it as T1. Then scan 5 to 8, because this is phase cycling. The scan 1 to 4 is first phase cycle, then scan 5 to 8 is second phase cycle. So now I increase the T1 to, which is now represented with increased spacing between the two pulses, so T1 plus delta T, right? Similarly, scan 9 to 12, I now have more spacing. Now the delay is T1 plus 2 delta T, and it keeps on increasing, right? So that's how T1 becomes a incrementable delay, T1 is a variable delay, and each of the FID obtained, so here let's call it as FID1, FID2, FID3, and so on. So each of the FID obtained are not added together but are stored at different locations in the computer. Okay, so FIDs are not added together. Okay, what do we do if we do not add these FIDs together? So so what we do is we actually store these FIDs to different locations in the computer, and it leads to compilation of data in the form of a matrix. What do I mean by matrix? So let's say each FID after digitization is so let's say if we have this FID over here, so if we digitize this FID, we can represent each FID as series of steps, right? Series of numbers, some numbers which are function of t1, sorry, t2, right? T2 is this point, this time over here, and this is FID1. So FID1 after digitization can be represented as a series of numbers which are nothing but function of t2 in some form, some cosine or sine function, right, of t2. Now when we are having second FID, so let me go to second page. So let's say these are some numbers as a function of t2. This is FID1. Similarly, we store FID2 at a different location which forms second set of numbers. Similarly, FID3 forms third set of numbers. All these sets of numbers are different because evolution time is different. So T here in first FID evolution time is T1, second FID evolution time is T1 plus delta T, third FID evolution time is T1 plus 2 delta T. So that means the magnetization at the end of the delay, the density operator is different in each case, right? So if density operator is different, that means the FID points or the signal will be starting at a different point after this pulse. So all these FIDs will have different numbers from FID1 to FID2, and this over here dimension, if I now plot, let's say if I'm plotting the first points, this actually becomes a function of t1, right? So on this side I have a function of t2 on x-axis, on y-axis I have a function of t1, right? So it's something, it looks something like this, that you have a FID which is looking like this. This is t2, and you have orthogonal to this, you have a FID which is looking like this, t1, right? And then of course this is like a 2D matrix, right? So you have a matrix of data instead of a row of data, as in case of one-dimensional experiment, right? So this is called as arraying the data, and this basically increases the dimensionality of the NMR data. So let us look at it more carefully. So let's let's take the same experiment, but let's not take the phase cycling steps. Let's just simply take 90x t1, 90x t2. Okay, t2 is the acquisition time, acquisition period. Okay, so let's look at the density operator, what is happening during this pulse program. So you have iz 90x takes it to minus iy, right? Now if I have t1, what I get here is minus iy cos omega t1. So this is the chemical shift evolution, plus ix sine omega t1. And now if I have second 90-degree pulse again, 90x, so y gets converted into z, so I have minus iz cos omega t1, and x remains as x because this is x pulse, plus ix sine omega t1, and if I have second evolution t2, then I get minus iz cos omega t1. So this does not evolve during chemical shift evolution because this is Z magnetization. So Ix will evolve into, so you have Ix sine omega t1 cos omega t2. Now the time constant is t2 plus Iy sine omega t1 and sine omega t2, right? Okay, so now if you take the trace of it with I plus operator, so we will get sine omega t1, and this will be exponential I omega t2, right? This is the oscillatory part of the signal with an amplitude which is modulated by t1, right? And then of course you will also have the relaxation component minus tr2, right? So this is the relaxation part, this is the oscillation, and this is the amplitude. Now if you look at the amplitude of the signal is modulated with T1. What do I mean by that? So meaning if we change the value of T1, the signal amplitude changes. That is, we can assume that if the pulse spacing is something like this, we have, let's say, maximum signal. If we increase the spacing, I mean, this can be actually calculated at what T1 the signal will be maximum and at what T1 the signal will be 0, but you will have something like this going on, right? At certain spacing, the signal will be 0. At certain other spacing, the signal will be negative, right? So basically what you have is, so if you array the intensity of these data points, the data arrayed as a function of T1, because the only thing which you are changing between different experiment is T1. So the data arrayed as a function of T1 at a fixed value of F2, that is the frequency 2, so T2, forms an interferogram which is very similar to the appearance of FID, right? So this thing actually modulates, right? So this is a function of T1. So this is it's not an FID, it is called as interferogram, and it is measured indirectly, right? It is not a directly measured FID, so this is measured indirectly, while during T2 what we measure is FID, and that is measured directly, right? Indirectly, because all we are doing is we are increasing the time, and hence the FID points are changing, which become a function of T1, right? Whereas T2 is simply the magnetization which is dephasing and relaxing back to z-axis, giving rise to FID, right? Okay, so thus T1 interferogram is indirectly sampled. That's why it is called as indirect dimension. So this dimension of the data is called as indirect dimension, and T2 dimension is called as direct dimension. Okay, so now if you notice that I spin operators precess at the same frequency during T1 or T2, because your Hamiltonian during T1 or T2 is same, right? So the Hamiltonian during T1 is omega I T1, and during T2 is omega I T2, right? This is the Hamiltonian during T1 and Hamiltonian during T2. So Hamiltonian is having same frequency component. That means the I spin operator is processing at same frequency during T1 as well as during T2. So therefore the signal which is observed will be observed at frequency. So when you Fourier transform the signal which is obtained over here, the trace, if you Fourier transform this, you will get signal only when f1 is matching with f2, right? So all other conditions the signal will go to 0. So that can be tested by carrying out the Fourier transformation. So we are not I'm not going to do that here, but you can try doing it. So if f1 is equal to f2, the signal is observed. And at all other conditions the signal is not observed. So what does it mean? So if I now try to look at how the spectrum will look like for that trace, so if I call this as f2 dimension and this one as f1 dimension, and let's say if I have two frequencies in f1 and two frequencies in f2, then my spectrum would look something like this. This is the diagonal, and I will have, so if this is my peak over here, this is my peak, this is my peak over here, then I will have two dots appearing in the spectrum. So this dot represent sorry, this is wrong. So what I'm trying to draw is this. So let's say this is delta 1, delta 2, delta 1, delta 2, two chemical shifts. Similarly this one. Okay. So the first peak over here appears at delta 1, delta 1, that is f1 is equal to f2. Similarly second peak appears at delta 2, delta 2, again f1 is equal to f2. So the spectrum basically it's like we are looking from the top, and the peaks are in 3 dimension. The peaks, the intensity of the peak is coming from away from the board, right? So if you are looking from the top, it appears like a contour. So if you look, it's like a mountain which is appearing as a contour, right, in a contour diagram. So it does not give any new information. All we are getting is two peaks. We have got two peaks in one-dimensional spectrum also, and here also we are getting two peaks along the diagonal. Each peak gives information of chemical shift, of its own chemical shift. So nothing fancy about it, right? So why are we doing this two-dimensional experiment? So let us say if we change the Hamiltonian during T1 and T2. So if we change the Hamiltonian during T1 and T2, then what happens? Then the evolution during T1 and T2 will be different, giving different signals. That means then you can expect signals where f1 is not equal to f2, right? So signals at f1 not equal to f2. So now how do we change the Hamiltonian? Let us see what happens if we include another spin. Okay, so so earlier initially we had taken only I spin. Let us now take a IS spin system such that that the coupling between that I and S are coupled spin system. So coupling between J IS is not equal to 0. Okay, so now let's see what happens. Okay, same pulse program. So you have 90, 90, T1, T2, 90x, 90x. Okay, so let's start with IZ term again. So you have 90x, will get minus iy. You have t1. Now you will have chemical shift evolution followed by coupling evolution, or vice versa, so you can do either one first. So that means you will have chemical shift Hamiltonian as well as coupling Hamiltonian, right? So I'm just going to write the resultant of this evolution, so you can try doing this at home by yourself. So you have minus iy cos omega I t1 cos pi j t1, right? And plus 2ix sz cos omega I t1, and this will be sine pi j t1. Okay, and you will also have two more terms, right? Yeah, plus ix sine omega I t1 cos pi j t1 plus 2iy sz. So remember, now there is a coupling, so it is generating an antiphase magnetization. Sine omega I t1 sine pi j t1, right? Now you give a 90-degree pulse again, 90x. So what happens if you do a 90x? So you will have minus iz cos omega I t1 cos pi j t1 minus 2ix sy cos omega I t1 sine pi j t1 plus ix sine omega I t1 cos pi j t1 minus 2iz sy sine omega I t1 sine pi j t1, right? So now this is a Z magnetization, so this will not evolve. This will be Z over here. This is multiple quantum, so this will also not be detected, right? So this is multiple quantum. So now you are left with one in phase component and one antiphase component, right? Both of them will be detected and will be evolved, right? So now let us see what happens to this particular term. So you have ix sine omega I t1 cos pi j t1. So you evolve with t2 and take a trace. So remember that in phase magnetization will give you a coupling cost term in terms of coupling. So you have, so basically the trace after evolution gives you sine omega I t1 cos pi j t1, which is coming from here, and then cos pi j t2 and exponential I omega I t2. Okay, and what happens to the antiphase component? So you have izsy2 sine omega I t1 sine pi j t1. So t2 followed by trace gives you sine omega I t1 and sine pi j t1. So it's a antiphase component, so you will get sine component here, sine pi j t2 and the complex evolution oscillation part omega s, because your frequency coherence is in antiphase is in s, so you will get frequency of s t2, right? So now similarly, if we start from sz magnetization, because see initially here we started with iz magnetization, so in the same way we can start with sz magnetization and we end up in complementary terms such as so I'm going to write directly the terms which come after evolving up to T2 and then after taking the trace. So all you will get is the complementary term of this and this, right? So you will have sine omega s t1 instead of omega I. Now I'm writing omega s cos pi j t1 cos pi j t2, and now instead of omega I will write omega s I omega s t2, and the second, which is coming from antiphase term, will be sine omega s t1 sine pi j t1 sine pi j t2 and exponential I omega I t2, right? So now if we carry out, so we have four terms now, so 1 2 3 and 4, right? So if we now carry out Fourier transformation with respect to t1 and t2, there are two time axes, so there will be two frequency axes. So if we now carry out Fourier transformation with respect to this, what kind of spectrum we will get? We'll get something like this. This is the diagonal. So you have f1, f2, and let's say if this is my delta 1, delta 2, so I will get the same diagonal peaks. So these are called as diagonal peaks, in addition, which have frequency as delta 1, delta 1 and delta 2, delta 2, right? So we will also get something called as cross peaks. Now if you carefully look at this frequency over here, so this is on one axis it is the frequency of delta 1, and on another axis it is the frequency of delta 2. So cross peak will be at delta 1, delta 2 and delta 2, delta 1. One is at delta 1, delta 2, another one is at delta 2, delta 1, right? Okay, so that means due to transfer of magnetization from I to S and S to I during the mixing pulse, which one is the mixing pulse? So you have during this pulse, magnetization or the coherence transfers from I to S and S to I. So that is why this particular period is called as mixing pulse, because you have transfer of coherence happening here, right? So due to this, there is appearance of cross peaks. What is the advantage here? So the advantage is that wherever there is a coupling between two spin pairs, you're bound to get a cross peak over there, right? In addition to diagonal peaks. So it is a confirmatory evidence of showing so appearance of a cross peak is a confirmatory evidence that there is a scalar coupling present between spin I and spin S, right? Okay, so what we have discussed here is the basis of an experiment called as correlation spectroscopy. Or in other words, it is called as COSY, COSY experiment. So correlation spectroscopy stems from this particular pulse program where two coupled spins show up a cross peak. Okay, so this is very extensively used experiment in a lot of pulse programs. This particular type of experiment is used. So, and is a very, very important experiment in biomolecules, in characterizing biomolecules. Okay. To summarize now, a 2D experiment is consists of a preparation period followed by evolution period followed by mixing period followed by acquisition period. Okay, so in short, in this particular case, we had preparation using the 90-degree pulse, then evolution was done during T1 period, mixing was done during 90-degree pulse, and acquisition was done during T2 period, right? Or in other words, we can say that during preparation, so before preparation we had sigma AQ, density operator was sigma AQ, which gets converted into sigma, let's say sigma 0, and then during T1 the sigma 0 gets converted into, it gets frequency labeling, so sigma T1, right? Density operator is now a function of T1, and during mixing, density operator also evolves with respect to other frequency, but it is not frequency labeled, so that's why I'm writing it as 0. And during acquisition, it gets density operator is now a function of T1 and T2, right? That's how it gives you two frequency axes, F1 and F2. So this is the basis of any two-dimensional experiment, and what we have learned. So we will continue to learn these sophisticated experiments more in next few classes. That is all for today. Thank you.